What's up, guys? It is Strider coming back at you again with some more Pokemon content. We are going to continue our lessons on drafting in a Pokemon Draft League. Today, just like we had the first lesson / episode of this series posted yesterday. I'll put a link. I'll probably just I'll put a link in the description at the very least, linking to the first episode, so you guys can check that out if you missed it. Today's topic of discussion is going to be kind of the importance of flexibility in your picks and why it's important to have flexible mons. And I guess that also will bleed over into what I call role compression, which again we will touch on later on in the video. So really, when you draft Pokemon, especially in the early rounds, at least for me, I think it's important to draft mons that are flexible, that can fill many different roles in your team. There are a lot of powerful mons that can only really do one or two things. What's a good example here? Superior, actually, is pretty much one of the best examples of a Tier 1 very powerful Pokemon that can definitely sweep teams, but at the same time, its move pool isn't great, and it really it doesn't really have a bunch of great other attributes. Like its typing isn't that good. It's just grass, so grass on its own isn't really a great type. So defensively, it can't do a lot there. Its defenses are okay, but again, with that typing, it kind of hinders it. So really, Superior is an example of a mon that you could draft early, and maybe you will. Maybe he fits your team. Like maybe you pick him up late because you're like, oh, I kind of just need this. But really, I don't personally think he's a great pick in the early rounds, simply because, like I said, he lacks that flexibility. He puts a lot of just pressure on your team to fill a lot of roles, which I think can lead to some unfavorable situations for you. So let's just talk about the value of flexibility. When you have a Pokemon on your team that can do many different things, just by merit of its move pool or its typing and its stat, all that stuff, just kind of the whole package of the Pokemon, just lend it to being able to do different things. It does a couple really good things for your team. The first thing it does, and the first thing we're gonna kind of jump into here, is that it takes some of the pressure off of your other Pokemon to do a job, and we'll kind of get into that right here. The example I'm going to use is someone to set up Stealth Rocks. If you do not know what Stealth Rocks is, it is a move present on just about every competitive Pokemon team, really. I mean, it for the most part. It does no initial damage when used, but what it does is once you set them up, once you hit Stealth Rocks, every time a Pokemon switches in on your opponent's team, they take 1/8 maximum damage or maximum health. So 1/8 of their total maximum health as damage. It is a rock type move, and it does take into account weaknesses and resistances. So ground types, for example, will take less, and fire types will take more, things like that. So that's what Stealth Rocks is, and again, we're just going to talk about the value of having more than one Stealth Rock setter on a team. So anyways, let's say one of your 11 Pokemon, that's how many roster slots we have in our league, is 11. So that's the example I used. But again, if you're watching this and from another league, maybe you have 10, maybe you have 12, maybe I don't know. It doesn't matter. However many you have, and you only have one Pokemon capable of setting up Stealth Rocks on that 11. That puts a lot of pressure on that Pokemon to not only be brought every week, just about, like, again, you're almost always going to want at least something to set Stealth Rocks. It's just too good. Like, I know when you think about it, so if you set this up on turn 1 and your opponent is out, even if they literally never switch out again, if they don't get rid of, like if they just switch out when necessary, they're still going to take 5/8 of their maximum total between all the, so over half, it's going to do over half a Pokemon's health worth of damage if they don't get rid of it. And there are ways to get rid of it, but we'll talk about that later. But anyways, so like I was saying, so this puts a lot of pressure on that Pokemon to not only be brought just about every week, but also bring stealth rocks on that Pokemon every week. This kind of limits your team as well as that Pokemon in particular, because this limits that Pokemon's flexibility. It can't, it's basically down a move. If it has to bring stealth rocks every week, you're essentially saying, okay, this Pokemon has 3 moves, every week. Plus, imagine if it was like a lower tier Pokemon. Like, what if it was something that you picked up super late? Like, what's an example? There's like a tier 5. Like, what if you had Sandslash and that was your only possible Stealth Rocker? I want to say he does. He's a ground type. But anyway, even if that's wrong, just imagine some low tier mon you don't really want to bring every week. You only brought it for specific purposes or something. It can really hinder your team if you just always have to bring that Pokemon. It just isn't really great. And plus, there will be a lot of times when you we're going to actually use Infernape for this example right here. There will be times when you don't have the move slot to allocate to that Pokemon, or it will not have like some vital coverage move that it needs in order to really function in your team. Or B, what if that Pokemon just has a bad matchup? Like, what if it just it's not like it? You look at the opponent's team and you're like, wow, this Pokemon just does not, fare well here against this team. So let's go ahead actually really quick, and let me just it might be easier if we just visualize it. What I'm talking about when I say this. So let's say we talked about yesterday Infernape and how flexible it is. I talked about how it can do a lot of great things for you. It can attack from the physical or special side. It can it can set up stealth rocks. Again, Infernape's not like the best stealth rock setter. It's because you just kind of want it to hit things as hard as it can before it goes down. And Stealth Rocks kind of eats up one of those coverage moves, but it's great that it has it, so that way in a pinch you can, do that. You can just be like, well, I really don't have another, I'm not bringing my other Stealth Rock setter here, I'm just going to throw it on my Infernape, who maybe the other 3 moves, maybe he doesn't even need that 4th move. You're looking at his team and you're like, I don't need it that bad. But let's say, for example, so let's go ahead and set up Infernape here, and let's say you're looking at the opponent's team and you're like, man, a Choice Banded Infernape would just be a house here. It would just crush his team, and you're like, well, let's bring us stabs, and we're gonna go ahead and obviously be physical with this Infernape, considering we're bringing Choice Band. We're gonna go ahead and do Flare Blitz, do close combat, and you're like, man, and then let's say you're looking at his team, and you're like, let's say he has, let's say his Mega is Mega Swampert. So obviously his only weakness is grass, and you're like, I really want to hit that thing. I want to make sure I can do a lot of damage to that guy. And then also, let's say his like tier 2 mon is, one of his higher picks or something is Gyarados. So really the best way to hit that would be with either a rock or electric type move. We're in luck because he does learn Thunder Punch, and we're going to go ahead and throw in, we said a grass move. We're going to go ahead and give him Grass Knot to handle that Swampert. And then you're looking at your team and you're like, oh shoot, I don't have a Stealth Rock setter on my team yet, and you're like, man, I really need one. So you're like, but then what do you? Now you're in the conundrum of Choice Band Stealth Rock isn't a great idea anyways, because for those of you that don't know, what the choice items do is they boost a stat by a lot. The Choice Band in particular raises your attack by 50%. But what it does do is once you're in and you use a move, you're locked into that move until you switch out. So obviously Stealth Rocks isn't a great option there because it just doesn't do any damage. You can you basically hit Stealth Rocks and have to switch out. I've seen it work before, but it's not ideal, of course. And so again, now you're in this situation where you're like, well, I can only pick, I can really only hit Swampert or Gyarados. Like that's it. I need to make a choice here. And you probably want to keep your stabs. I mean, that's the other thing. You could get rid of your close combat or your Flare Blitz, but generally it's nice to have those stabs. These are going to hit a lot of things really hard. Like, I mean, a close combat will still hit a Swampert just fine, really hard, but obviously that Grass Knot is probably going to one-hit KO it. So let's go ahead and say we're only going to... It does learn Stealth Rock. Okay, good. I'm not a crazy person. Yeah, and then... sure, we're going to go ahead and actually we're going to change this to Naive. just to not lower our special attack there. But yeah, so again, this is just not ideal. Now we have a choice banded. We might have to switch this to say something like a life orb. But again, that limits his. I mean, he hits less hard. He does get the flexibility to attack different turns, and also it definitely limits his survivability. It puts him on a fast clock that will that could definitely cause you some pain, especially if you really feel like that. You run some calcs before the match, and you're like, wow, this choice banded Infernape is going to do a lot of work. Again, so you kind of see the problem with only, and again, this is your only, we're assuming this is a scenario where you're like, well, this is my only stealth rocker. I don't really have any other choices, so you have to bring it. Again, let's say even worse. Let's say you're in a scenario where he has Mega Swampert, Gyarados, and what's another mon that is good against him? Alakazam. He has an Alakazam, and you're pretty sure he's going to bring all three of those. Those are three of his more powerful Pokemon, and you're just like, well, all of those Pokemon kind of own Infernape, and I don't even want to bring him. I'm pretty sure that half of his team is not something I want to fight against. It's just not good for me. What that means is now you kind of have to bring him anyways because you need a Stealth Rock Setter. Especially if he has a Gyarados on his team, you probably want Stealth Rocks because Gyarados is going to take a quarter of his health every time he switches in because of that rock weakness he does have. We talked about that yesterday. So again, it just you see now why I'm saying it's important to have more than one Pokemon to set Stealth Rocks, and this ties into flexibility because maybe if you had picked more flexible Pokemon, you wouldn't be in this scenario. You wouldn't have such a focused set. Maybe you pick something that has the option to be a Stealth Rocker for you. Maybe it's not even a great Stealth Rocker, but it's let's say even if you pick like a Tier 4 Pokemon, like let's go with who's like a lower tier person that might fit well. Okay, let's actually do this. He actually fits pretty well with so we're going to go ahead and say we picked up a Bronzong. Bronzong's a Tier 4 Pokemon. His defenses are very high, though. He's a pretty decent Stealth Rocker, really, just due to his natural bulk, and he actually fits pretty well with Infernape. They just kind of, Infernape obviously takes the Fire type meant for him, and Bronzong, you can give him Levitate, and he'll take the Ground type. So they have some synergy there. It's not that they don't. Also, same with Psychic types. Bronzong's going to eat up those Psychic type moves meant for our Infernape. Same as Flying meant for our Infernape. They really do make a good pair. And again, so he could have, like if you would have, and he's pretty flexible. He doesn't have to be a Stealth Rock Setter, but again, just having that, you really want to have multiple Mons that kind of overlap. Especially on those important roles like a Stealth Rock Setter or even something like a Rapid Spinner to get rid of those rocks. So really just keep that in mind when you're drafting your team. Draft flexible Mons so you are going to have enough different ways to fill the roles that are necessary for your team. Another good example, let's see, is like Garchomp. He can set rocks. Again, not like an ideal Stealth Rock Setter, but he can do it. Terrakions another Tier 1 example. There's a lot of examples, and then things with like spin, like Scissor can defog, so he's kind of a spinner. And he's very flexible. He can be offensive, defensive. He can hit. He can be like a Swords Dancer. He can do so many different things. He's another good example. It's a very good idea to have flexibility in your Pokemon. Again, so Infernape, like I said, is a great secondary rock setter. You usually don't want to bring rocks on him, but the fact that he has a move at all, means that in a pinch, if you choose to run another set on your primary rock setter, like let's say you're like, God, this Bronzong, I really need that fourth move slot for some key move that I need to run. Or if you're just like, wow, Bronzong sucks in this match, I'm not going to bring him, then that means you can just slap on that Stealth Rock on your Infernape, and you're okay. You're good to go. You don't need, one move on him can be a big deal, but again, it kind of helps. The other thing that it really does is having flexible Mons, is that how do I explain this? It makes your team much more difficult to prep for. Because instead of prepping for 11 Pokemon, if you have a Pokemon that can run like 7 different viable sets, all of a sudden he's like, this Pokemon could be anything. I don't know what to expect from this guy. I don't know how to prep for it. It's very hard to prep for a Pokemon that is in reality like 10 different Pokemon because of all the viable sets it has. An example of a very inflexible Mon is this Mon right here, and I'll show you why. Wobbuffet is kind of the literally like the poster child for inflexible Mons. This move, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, really, he learns 7 moves that actually Splash obviously doesn't do anything, and some of these other moves are questionable too. So we'll say 1, 2, 3, 4. He learns 7 moves total. I mean, you saw looking at like Infernape's moves, like he learns 100. He learns a million different moves, and there's even Bronzong. I mean, Bronzong's not as flexible, but still he learns. So Wobbuffet is the prime example of a very inflexible Mon. He's very powerful and can be very good in the right circumstances. But it essentially limits his viable sets to basically 1. Like everyone knows if you bring a Wobbuffet what it's going to do. If you just look at the set or look at Wobbuffets, like, okay, this is what this thing's going to do. That does definitely hinder him. That's why he's so low tier in league formats, because he's so easy to prep for. It's just very easy to prep for. Now, a prime example of a Pokemon that's the opposite of Wobbuffet, a very, very flexible Pokemon that we're going to go ahead and talk about here for a minute, is and an example of a Tier 1, like a Tier 1 Pokemon that is insanely flexible, fills multiple roles for your team, can do so many different things, is Excadrill. Excadrill has a great move pool. He hits a lot of different things, super effective damage with his different types of coverage. He has many viable sets that all kind of force your opponent to act and prepare for in different ways. He can be your stealth rock spinner or setter. He can be your rapid spinner. He can be your late game sweeper. He can really he's kind of the definition of do it all. I mean, the only person I can think of that's probably more flexible than him, or one of the only people is like a Mew who can literally do anything. So let's go ahead. So Mew's another good example, but not the example we decided to go with today. I think Excadrill is probably just a little better than Mew anyways. He just just more powerful, just in terms of raw power. But anyway, so here we have 3 different. I'm sorry, this is open. How do I close this stupid chat? There we go. So here we have 3 different Excadrill sets. They all do very different things. You can see here. So here's a Choice Scarf Mold Breaker set. Mold Breaker, what it does is it makes you hit better. It makes you hit things you shouldn't be able to hit. Like, for example, if someone has Levitate, you can still your attack can still go right through that and hit them with your attack. So here we have a Choice Scarf set, which is, again, I talked about the choice items. They lock you into an item, but they raise a stat by a lot. Choice Scarf raises your speed by 50%. His speed's fairly respectable, but it definitely goes through the roof with a Choice Scarf on it, and obviously helps its offensive capabilities there just by being able to attack first. And here we just got Iron Head, Earthquake, Rock Slide, and X Scissor. This is a pretty standard standard Choice Scarf set. Sometimes you might see Rapid Spin there, which is, again, great that he can learn that. Maybe replace this X Scissor with Rapid Spin and really help him. Maybe you need a spinner for this match and you don't have one yet, and you're just like, I'll just throw it on there. Here we have a much more bulky set. Here, we'll look at the IVs here. So on this set, this is the Choice Scarf set. You can see here we have the pretty much max speed, max attack, and a little bit of special defense investment. This guy is going to hit very hard. He has a very high base attack, you can see over here with the 135. And if we go to the next one, we were talking about how this is a much more bulky set. You see it has the leftovers instead of the Scarf. It's got Earthquake and Iron Head as its main attacking moves, and then it also, look at this, it does Rapid Spin as well as Stealth Rock, which really, really is great for a team. We'll talk about that in a minute. But anyways, you can see here, completely different set. Last time we had invested fully in the attack and speed. This time we're go ahead. He has a great HP stat, you can see, and we're investing basically fully into the HP stat as well as the special defense. So he's going to be able to take up a lot of those special attacks aimed for your team. And so again, he makes a decent little special wall / bulky pivot type Pokemon. We have a little bit here invested into the attack. Of course, we could put that in defense if we really wanted to be fully bulky, but the one extra EV in attack's not going to do a lot. And then here we have kind of what he's really horrified for, like everyone's afraid of this Pokemon for this reason. Sandrush. What Sandrush does, if you do not know, is it doubles his speed in a sandstorm. I don't know if any of you are familiar, but there are Pokemon like Hippowdon or Tyranitar that you could have on your team that allow you to, they set up sand as soon as they enter. Like they just enter the battlefield and then a sandstorm starts. Obviously, one of those Pokemon paired with something like an Excadrill can just be absolutely horrifying. So here you see his speed is his speed is doubled, and you can see here, I mean, if you look at his speed, we have max speed investment. You could probably, that's one of the great things about the League format, is you could go ahead and look at your Pokemon, your opponent's speed, and say, well, what's the fastest he could possibly get to? And just barely speed creep that. Just have one extra speed, like, you could figure out that you're like, well, actually, I only need 124 speed EVs here. In order to actually outspeed everything on his team, and that allows you to put some more speed here to put some more into his bulk here, making him that much harder to take down once he does get going. Because again, with max speed, I don't know how much you guys have been paying attention to the stats, but if you look around, nothing's going to outspeed this. Like it's impossible. I mean, I'm sure it's possible, but 550 speed is going to outspeed everything. There's not going to be a thing that's going to outspeed this thing in the sand. Plus, it has that great attack stat. Like I said, we're even running Swords Dance to set up some more attack here, and it's just going to run a pretty standard set of Earthquake, Iron Head, and Rock Slide. This is a good set, again, but completely different than these other sets. Very different. I know pretty much Earthquake and Iron Head is the same here, but really what these sets are trying to do are very different. Like this is kind of your late game sweeper. He's going to come in at the end and set up on something that doesn't threaten it. Maybe one Swords Dance, and then it's just going to clean house on your opponent's team because nothing's going to be able to outspeed it. It can't really be revenge killed again because it's so quick in the sand. And yeah, it's going to do a lot of damage. Here's a Choice Scarf set like we talked about again. This is going to switch in a lot. It's not really a late game sweeper. It's kind of just going to come in, hit something, and then get out. This is a set that's designed to switch in a whole lot and just really take on those defense or those special attacks meant for your team. So again, just three very different sets, and these are just, I mean, obviously there's other things you could do with this mon. These are just kind of three prime examples with this Pokemon that you could utilize. And this kind of brings us naturally into talking about role compression. Role compression is when one mon on your team is filling multiple roles. So there are kind of different roles on your team that you need. Like maybe you're like, well, I really need a physical wall. I need a stealth rock setter. This team really wants a rapid spinner. Maybe you want a cleric if you want to go that far. Like you could be talking about you want something to set up heal bell or aromatherapy, which if you don't know what those moves do, they clear away all status conditions on any of your Pokemon. So again, just talking about these different roles, and two that are usually filled on teams are a Rapid Spinner and a Stealth Rocker. And you can see over here, if you will, that this Pokemon actually fills both. It is able to Rapid Spin here as well as set up Stealth Rocks. This means that in some ways he's really feeling multiple roles on your team. As again, he is your spinner and your stealth rocker. It frees up other mons on your team to do other things. So maybe instead of having, you were like, well, I need to have one Pokemon to be my rapid spinner, one Pokemon to be my stealth rocker. Now you have 5 other mons that are completely free to do whatever they want. They can have other moves that you don't need to worry about that. Again, this just helps your team a lot by freeing up those slots. Maybe one mon gets to run a coverage move. It usually doesn't get to run because you have this mon doing both these roles for your team. Or even let's say something like, let's say you're like, well, he already hits plenty hard. I'm just going to go ahead and put Rapid Spin right here. You're like, there we go. No big deal. You can maybe switch him in a little bit earlier, and now you have like your late game sweeper as well as your rapid spinner all in one. You're just again. So Excadrill is a prime example of what I like to call role compression, where he can really fill multiple roles at the same time. So we talked a little bit about role compression and just what flexibility does for your team, as well as your picks. And there are many other roles that I find important, or that are important to various degrees at least. Sorry about my dog. Like I said, there are heal bell users. There's wish passers. Even simple things like physical and special walls. There are a rare few Pokemon that can be like both a physical and special wall at the same time. And this can also, that's another example of role compression, because it can kind of allow the rest of your team to be offensive. If this one Pokemon can take all the hits for your team, then instead of having maybe two walls, maybe you were like, well, I need a physical wall and a special wall. Now you have a physical and special wall, and then your other 5 mons can just focus on hitting as hard as they can. Just all 5 other offensive threats. And really sometimes you can just out-threat your opponent that way. One quick example that, again, we talked about yesterday of a Pokemon capable of in some ways filling that physical and special wall is Ferrothorn. It has the stats and the move pool to do it. And typing, of course, he only has 2 weaknesses, which are pretty easy to cover with 5 other Pokemon. Again, there are just many other roles and things we really didn't talk about, but I think this gives you a pretty decent idea on the importance of just general flexibility on your Pokemon, and again, role compression. Role compression is something that I really think you should maybe think about when you're making these picks, just to kind of have a better idea of what's going on there. Like, again, we can talk about Latios, and Latios are good examples of things that can fill multiple roles at the same time. Mew. We talked about Mew. He's a great example. Garchomp, Excadrill, Heatran. Again, just all kinds of different things that can do multiple things for your team. Those are just some of the examples. I hope you guys liked this video. Again, I will link the first example, or the first lesson in the description in case you guys missed it. Yeah, if you guys liked it, please let me know. Yeah, leave some comments. Thanks for watching, guys, and have a good one.